Welcome back to Fluent Talk. I'm Ela, and next to me is Ben, who is currently trying to remember which decade he was born in. Today, we're playing a game called Myth Busting. We're taking aim at the biggest cultural misconceptions in the world.
Hey, I remember my decade and my name. Anyway, our first myth, brought to us by Ela, is about the so-called silent generation. Go on, Ela, bust this one.
Okay, so the myth is that the silent generation, the folks born before the baby boomers, are passive, politically quiet, and have no real power. But Ben, that is 100% false. That's our first big misconception.
Wait, are you sure? I thought they just knit things and... I'm trying to sound serious. And went to bed early. Isn't that the whole point of calling them silent?
That's a nasty stereotype. Actually, their silence was due to the strong post-war conformity of the 50s. The real point, the thing everyone misses, is their current economic power. They are often the wealthiest generation in terms of net worth, especially due to property ownership.
So you're saying their economic power is still, it's still really dominant because of like the fact they bought their houses for like pennies versus our generation's crushing debt burden?
Bennies, Ben. Yes, they bought houses for pennies. They represent massive net worth. And the irony is their so-called silent nature actually created the conditions, the post-war stability and lack of extreme political volatility that allowed them to accumulate that huge economic power.
Right. So the lesson here is that you shouldn't judge a generation by its name. They're not silent. They're just incredibly loaded and politically active behind the scenes. Big misconception busted. I'm already feeling poorer. We've just busted the myth of the silent generation and talked about economic power. Are you also feeling the debt burden? Stay with us. Next, I'm debunking a classic historical myth that the Middle Ages were totally dark.
Ooh, a history lesson. Let's see if Ben's facts are as solid as his jokes. Next, myth 2. Ben tackles the myth of the Dark Ages and the idea of historical revision. Ooh, a history lesson. Let's see if Ben's facts are as solid as his jokes. Next, myth 2. Ben tackles the myth of the Dark Ages and the idea of historical revision.
Right, my turn. The myth is simple but persistent, that the Middle Ages, the period from roughly the 5th to the 15th century, were a completely dark age of zero progress, no science, and general gloom. That is pure nonsense.
Nonsense? Strong words, Professor Ben. But come on, castles, plagues, everyone smells bad. It sounds pretty dark to me. What is the actual historical context here?
The actual historical context is that the term Dark Age was actually invented by later Renaissance scholars who wanted to feel superior. It's a huge misconception. We call the process of correcting this a historical revision. We had massive advances. Agriculture improved dramatically. We saw the birth of the modern university system. The very concept of a university started then.
Okay, stop. You're getting so excited. Your inner history professor is coming out. I think you actually were a medieval scholar in a past life, Ben.
I might have been. But I'm serious. Historical revision shows that this was actually a period of huge cultural diffusion. Think about the Islamic Golden Age. They preserved and advanced Greek math and science while Europe was mostly fighting. The myth that it was all dark is just a massive oversimplification.
So, the key takeaway is that the Dark Ages is itself a misconception born out of cultural snobbery, and that historical revision forces us to look beyond simplistic labels and examine the full historical context.
Exactly. The world is always more complex than the labels we stick on it. Speaking of labels, next we move from the past to the future. Myth 3, Ella tackles the myth that all social media algorithms are purely designed for your happiness.
Exactly. The world is always more complex than the labels we stick on it. Speaking of labels, next we move from the past to the future. Myth 3. Ella tackles the myth that all social media algorithms are purely designed for your happiness.
My myth. This one is huge. The misconception is that the algorithm, that mysterious code that decides what you see, is designed purely for user engagement, to keep you happy, clicking, and liking. That's only half the story then. It's a sweet lie.
Wait, hold on. If it's not about user engagement, what is it about? I mean, my feed is full of just recipes and videos of Ben Stiller being funny. Isn't that engagement?
That's what they want you to think, my dear. It's not about making you happy, it's about making you predictable for advertisers. The real purpose of the algorithm is maximum ad revenue and monetization. They want you to stay engaged just long enough to show you the perfect ad.
So you're saying my cat video feed is actually a sophisticated trap for my wallet?
It's a distraction from the real danger. The algorithm creates what we call echo chambers. The myth is that it's about engagement, but the consequence is that it only shows you stuff you already agree with, making you less informed. That's an ethical problem for the whole democratic process.
Wow. So the myth is debunked. It's not about keeping me entertained. It's not controlling my attention for monetization and creating an echo chamber. The algorithm is less a friendly curator and more a highly paid salesman. We've just busted the myth of the benevolent algorithm and discussed monetization. Do you feel trapped? Stay with us. Next, I'm tackling a huge myth in science, the timeline for artificial intelligence, AI.
Ooh, Ben's gonna talk about science. Let's see if he breaks the internet before we're finished. Next, myth 4. Ben tackles the myth that artificial intelligence is about to become sentient. Ooh, Ben's gonna talk about science. Let's see if he breaks the internet before we're finished. Next, myth 4. Ben tackles the myth that artificial intelligence, also known as AI, is about to become sentient.
Right. This myth causes so much public anxiety. The misconception is that we are on the verge of creating artificial general intelligence. That is, AI that can think, learn, and reason just like a human. Public perception is that it's coming next week. The vast majority of experts disagree.
Wait, so you're telling me that we don't have to worry about Skynet taking over and launching all the missiles? Because the media makes it sound like we're one software update away from a robot uprising. I mean, that's just good drama.
Well, I mean, the drama is what sells, right? But the reality is that the AI we have right now, your Siri, your ChatGPT, is what we call narrow AI. It's only good at one thing. The jump from a narrow AI to an AGI is not like a simple software update. It requires a fundamental theoretical breakthrough that we just haven't had yet.
So you're trying to say that the public misconception is based on Hollywood, not on scientific accuracy?
Yes, exactly. It's sensationalism. The amount of power and processing needed to mimic human thought is it's huge. It's a huge leap. And the biggest myth is that we even understand what consciousnness is well enough to replicate it. So while AI is definitely affecting the job market, the sentient, all-powerful AGI it's still science fiction.
So the myth that AGI is imminent is busted. Current AI is just a super smart tool for specific tasks, not a thinking human replacement. That's a relief, for my job security anyway. We've just defined AI, AGI, and narrow AI. Are you still worried about the robots? Stay with us. Next, I'm tackling a myth that divides the world, the impact of globalization on cultural identity.
A perfect segue. If technology isn't dissolving our identities, maybe global commerce is. Next, myth 5. Ella examines the relationship between globalization and the survival of local cultural identity.
A perfect segue. If technology isn't dissolving our identities, maybe global commerce is. Next, myth 5. Ela examines the relationship between globalization and the survival of local cultural identity.
Okay, my myth. The persistent misconception is that globalization, the sharing of products and ideas across borders, inherently leads to cultural homogenization. That every city will look the same, eat the same, and listen to the same pop song. It sounds logical, right? But the myth is busted by one word: hybridization.
Right. The idea of cultural homogenization is scary. Everything becomes McDonald's and Disney. That kind of bland, generic, international sameness.
Oh, Ben, stop right there, you academic relic. Cultural homogenization is the old sociological term. We need to update your vocabulary, professor. The actual truth is what we call cultural hybridization or glocalization.
Hybridization. I mean, I knew that. I was testing you. So explain hybridization in simple terms then, smarty pants.
It's not sameness, it's adaptation. Local cultural identity is actually strengthened by having to define itself against global influences. You take the global idea and you localize it. It's you get a local flavor of a global dish. It's not a straight line to sameness. It's a complex, unpredictable remixing of global and local elements that keeps cultural identity very much alive.
So the myth that globalization equals the death of cultural identity is busted because people are smart enough to adopt the global into the local. I like that. Cultural hybridization it is. We've just defined globalization, cultural identity, and cultural hybridization. How does your city adopt global trends? Stay with us. Next, I'm tackling the final myth, the most important measure of a country.
If culture isn't being measured by burgers, maybe a country shouldn't be measured by its money. Next, myth 6, Ben tackles the myth that a nation's only true measure of success is its GDP. If culture isn't being measured by burgers, maybe a country shouldn't be measured by its money. Next, myth 6. Ben tackles the myth that a nation's only true measure of success is its GDP.
This one is the most persistent myth in global policy. The misconception is that gross domestic product, GDP, the total monetary value of goods and services produced, is the only valid metric for a nation's success. It's what everyone quotes, but it's fundamentally flawed.
Flawed is an understatement. GDP is ridiculous. It counts the money spent cleaning up a massive oil spill, but it doesn't count the happiness of a volunteer picking up trash. It literally counts pollution as a plus, but not the free work of a stay-at-home parent. Am I being too harsh, or is that the cold, hard truth?
No, you're not wrong. The cold, hard truth is that GDP is a metric designed for a post-war industrial era, and it ignores things like environmental sustainability, income inequality, and human well-being. That's why we need new metrics like well-being indicators.
So tell us what those well-being indicators are, Ben. What does the alternative look like exactly?
Well-being indicators are like measurements that include factors beyond just money. They look at things like access to education,
life expectancy, the environmental impact, and the citizens' perception of trust in government. They are trying to create a holistic picture. I mean, instead of just a single number.
So the myth that GDP tells the whole story is busted because it doesn't account for, well, life. We need to move towards well-being indicators to measure genuine success. That's a perfect way to end our myth-busting session. We've just defined GDP and the importance of well-being indicators. What does your country measure? Stay with us. Now we're going to review all 8 key terms from this wild ride.
That was fast. We debunked 6 major myths, from the silent generation to the speed of AI. Now let's make sure you can use these terms when you talk to others.
That was fast. We debunked 6 major myths, from the silent generation to the speed of AI. Now, let's make sure you can use these terms when you talk to others.
Welcome to the final segment. We picked 8 core terms that define today's myth-busting session. First, misconception. This is a view or opinion that is incorrect because it is based on faulty thinking or poor understanding. Example, the idea that the Middle Ages were totally dark is a major historical misconception.
Next, economic power. This refers to the ability of a person, group, or nation to exert influence based on their financial strength and wealth. Example, the silent generation still wields significant economic power.
Third, historical revision. This is the process of critically re-examining the accepted views of historical events or periods. Example, historical revision shows the Dark Ages were actually periods of great cultural diffusion.
Fourth, algorithm. This is a set of rules or calculations followed by a computer, especially for problem solving. Example, social media algorithms prioritize ad revenue over user engagement.
Fifth, cultural hybridization. This is the blending of elements from 2 or more cultures to create a new, unique cultural form. Example, globalization often leads to cultural hybridization, not homogenization.
Globalization. This refers to the increasing interconnectedness and interdependence of countries through trade, technology, and cultural exchange. Example, globalization has dramatically changed how local businesses compete.
Seventh, GDP, the abbreviation for gross domestic product. It is the total value of goods and services produced in a country. Example, GDP is an incomplete measure of a nation's overall well-being.
And finally, well-being indicators. These are metrics that measure factors like health, education, and environmental quality rather than just economic output. Example, many nations are now adopting well-being indicators alongside GDP.
That was a fun tour through history and technology, Ben. Thanks for keeping those facts straight.
Anytime. My pleasure. So, our final question for you. What is the biggest misconception about your own country or culture that you think the world needs to know? Tell us below.
Remember to hit that subscribe button. We post a brand new episode with fresh debates and essential vocabulary every single day at 6 a.m. on the English Easy channel.
We'll see you next time. Bye for now.